we look at them and we say, oh, they don't have any bathrooms, so they're poor. And they would look at us and say, it's amazing that you can manage to live such anguished lives as you live, afraid to go out, living behind locked doors, afraid of your neighbors, terrified of losing your job, terrified of how you're going to end up, living isolated, having to handle all of your problems completely alone. They would think we are terribly poor. They would really feel sorry for us if they could see us. And they would say, yes, you've got wonderful toys. There's no doubt about it. And we admire your toys. But to think that those toys make you wealthy is very bizarre.
Keep watching to learn more. You can now download all 9 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org. New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. The subject we'll be exploring today is saving the world. And with me is Daniel Quinn, a novelist and author of several books, including Ishmael, which won the Turner Tomorrow Fellowship, The Story of Bee, and an autobiography called Providence. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You know, many people come up with their own analyses of the present crisis in the world, political, economic analyses, spiritual analyses. I'm under the impression, after reading your works, that you've attempted to reach perhaps deeper, further than any of these, because you seem to be suggesting that if we want to understand the source of our present crisis, human-created crisis, we have to go back to the dimmest reaches of what we call recorded history, to the very earliest of human civilizations.
Yes, I have a different take on it than most everyone, in that I don't believe that our problems are of recent origin. The Unabomber, for example, is convinced that our problem is really very modern, and that if we just go back a couple of centuries and smash all the machinery, everything will be wonderful again. Mm-hmm. And I trace our problems back to the beginnings of our culture, and make the point really that it is not humanity that is destroying the world. It is one culture of humanity, and happens to be our culture, which also happens to be the dominant culture on the planet, but that humanity has never been responsible for destroying the world.
What you're suggesting, and you have a very eloquent term for it, the great forgetting, that prior to about 10,000 years ago, the world was populated by people who had lived in harmony with nature for hundreds of thousands of years, and we have managed to forget an enormous amount about who they were as human beings and how they lived.
Well, we began by forgetting our origins in that world. By the time that Plato and Aristotle and the classical philosophers were beginning to think about the human life and the meaning of our life here, they had all notion that we had a different kind of life before was completely disappeared from our culture. And they had no way of guessing that we had a life before we began building civilization.
In other words, well, I suppose this is clearly exemplified by the fundamentalist version of the Judeo-Christian myth, which suggests that the world was created about 5,000 years ago, when soon as Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, they began farming.
Yes, well, this was the common understanding, not just of fundamentalist Christians by any means, but by people of our culture from the beginning, because they understood that it was man's nature to be a farmer, just as it is the nature of bees to build hives, and that it's the nature of man to build civilization, just the way that it's the nature of birds to build nests. And they never doubted that, and so they went, in looking back on the origins of human life, they went back to the beginnings they could find, which were, in fact, about 5,000 years. And they said, well, humans must have begun right about here, and began building what we know of as civilization. And then when the paleontologists of the 18th and 19th century began to demonstrate that we were much, much older than that, thinkers were forced to tack on 3 million years of human life. But they were not reluctant they were reluctant rather, to think very deeply about this. It was an embarrassment to them, and they assigned no importance to it.
It was called prehistoric.
Prehistory, merely prehistory. It was something that happened before history, which of course just happens to be our history, the history of our culture. That's the true beginning of human life in our own mythology. And
even though there is some sort of romantic sentiment about the noble savages, by and large, I think civilized people around the world consider that to have been a horrible time to have been alive.
Very definitely. Yes, there is that twin pole there of thinking of them as having an idyllic life, but one you wouldn't care to have it. You wouldn't care to live that way, actually. Yet, oddly enough, wherever you do happen to find people who are still living that way, and of course they never stopped living that way, you find people who do not live anguished lives, which is one of the characteristics of our own culture. And this is not romanticism. This is quite true.
Well, it strikes me that when we think about these people, and we know indigenous peoples who are not part of our economic culture, our agricultural society, our wage society, and they exist throughout the world now, but I think by and large people, even looking at them, say these are poor, wretched, unhappy people.
They are, if your notion of wealth is our favorite toys. If you think of wealth as being computers and televisions and electronic games and automobiles and things like that, but if you think of wealth as personal security, as never having to worry about the future, if you think that's wealth, then you would look to these people and you would see wealth. But we look at them and we say, oh, they don't have any bathrooms, so they're poor. And they would look at us and say, it's amazing that you can manage to live such anguished lives as you live, afraid to go out, living behind locked doors, afraid of your neighbors, terrified of losing your job, terrified of how you're going to end up, living isolated, having to handle all of your problems completely alone. They would think we are terribly poor. They would really feel sorry for us if they could see us. And they would say, yes, you've got wonderful toys. There's no doubt about it. And we admire your toys. But to think that those toys make you wealthy is very bizarre.
Well, there is a sense, I think, in probably ever since the age of the Romantic poets, where we felt that in our modern age, we've lost something crucial. Carl Jung wrote a book called Modern Man in Search of a Soul, and we look, I think, now to indigenous peoples as having still maintained some sort of a soulful relationship with themselves and with the world around them that we've lost. But I think you're saying something deeper than that. You're suggesting that they survived for hundreds of thousands of years without ever jeopardizing themselves and the environment. And our civilization in about 10,000 years is, I think you would say, on the brink of extinction.
Yes, it isn't I who particularly say that, but others who are specialists in studying this, and I take their findings. World Watch think tank gives us 40 years, or they did a few years ago, give us 40 years in which to turn things around. Otherwise, they think that the damage that we're doing will be irreversible. Mm-hmm. But that isn't something that I particularly say. It's rather I quote other people.
You don't see yourself as a prophet in the wilderness?
No, not at all. Mm-hmm. No. Perhaps in the wilderness, but not a prophet.
Okay. I mean, because there are those who might say, look, the human lifespan is longer than it's ever been. We are traveling in outer space. We are solving the mystery of our genetic structure. There are all these wonderful things one could point to.
Yeah. And they definitely are wonderful. But we paid too high a price for them, and we would have had them anyway. And we needn't have paid the price that we paid to have these things. Mm-hmm. The people who we encountered here in North America when we came to spread our revolution were also seeking ways to settle. And they had tried many experiments and discarded many experiments. And the odd thing is that we could not discard our experiment even when it began to fail, as it is now failing. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the big differences between them and us.
Well, it's inconceivable for most people to think that we can live in other ways than the way that we do live. And that's where you do seem like a prophet. You seem to be telling people, get out of your prison, take off your blinders. There are other possibilities.
This is one of the reasons why it's so tragic for us to be destroying lever peoples, indigenous peoples, aboriginal peoples, because each one of them represents a solution that has evolved from the very beginning of human life that is of immense importance to us. Mm-hmm. The reason why these people work, or the reason why their lifestyle works, is the same reason that birds' wings work, or that a bird's beak works, is that it has stood the test of time. And they're not forever convening and reconvening their legislatures to try and figure out how they can make these things work, because they work. Mm-hmm. They have a lifestyle that is very suitable for them. They like it. They don't have any problems with it. They're not always scratching their heads trying to figure out what's gone wrong, because nothing's gone wrong. Mm-hmm.
I think I should say that in your novels you do refer to two kinds of people in the world: the takers, meaning modern societies, and the leavers. And also you equate Eastern and Western culture, and I think Northern and Southern culture. We're all part of this taker society. It's basically the indigenous peoples who are the leavers.
Yes, these terms are introduced as a substitute for the terms that we habitually use, which are civilized and primitive. Mm-hmm. And I preferred to find a pair of terms that were not so heavily loaded as civilized and primitive. But I find, if you look at it this way, then the civilized people begin to look very much alike. If you go to Beijing or you go to Tokyo, you will find that you have to live the same way there that we live in New York or Philadelphia or San Francisco. That is very key. You must get a job, and you must earn your living. And this is the cultural thing that divides us from all other peoples in the world. Among indigenous peoples, work is unknown, virtually unknown, because food is free. Mm-hmm. And it's only we who have locked up the food.
Well, as I recall, your strong criticism of the takers is that they have worldwide developed a vision that the world is meant for us. We are the pinnacle of creation. We have the power of life and death over other species on the planet, and any other species or even any other group of humans that gets in the way of our food supply, not only will we prevent them from doing that, we'll exterminate them altogether.
Yes, and it seems to us, after 10,000 years of living this way, that this is the way that God must have ordained for us to live. But out of the hundreds of thousands of human cultures on this planet, we are alone in that. Mm-hmm. And we take it that this must have been divinely ordained because look at how powerful we are. Look at how many peoples we have destroyed. Look at how many people we've killed off. That must mean that we're more powerful than anyone else. And isn't that sort of proof that this is the way humankind was meant to be? Mm-hmm. And but this ruthless lifestyle of ours, of course, made it possible for us to become the rulers of the world.
And basically, I would have to say you indict every major world religion as being supportive of this taker ideology.
Well, they grew up together. The currently major religions all grew up among the people that I've called the takers, the people who practice totalitarian agriculture. And their role in our culture is to be forever shaking their finger at us and saying, naughty people, you're not living well, you're bad people, you're sinful people, and you must raise your sights to something higher. Mm-hmm. And so there is a kind of a husband and wife relationship that exists between our culture and our religions, where you have the wife who is always who is married to a coarse and materialistic husband, and the wife is always trying to raise the sights of this, and they have a symbiotic mm-hmm. relationship.
In other words, the religions need people to be misbehaving,
yes, really.
So that they can therefore scold them.
Yes.
And as I understand it, what you suggested is that sometime 3,000, 4,000, 2,000 years ago, the taker civilization had spread so widely, and it had already created so many social problems, alienation and famine and disruptions of all sorts, by getting out of harmony with the natural way of being, that these religions evolved as a response to a situation which has only gotten worse and worse and worse in spite of the best efforts of the religious traditions.
Yes, these are all religions of anguished people, and they grew up among people as an answer to the anguish. We invented anguished classes. We invented suffering classes. Among Aboriginal peoples, you simply don't find classes that are there to suffer. They're there to do the suffering for other people. Mm-hmm. And this is something distinctly our own. And people 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, were looking for ways to rebel against this, and of course there were countless rebellions and countless uprisings, slave uprisings, and so on in ancient times, and then more and more they began to develop religious replies to their anguish, and began to develop a religious way of dealing with their anguish. As before that, religions were primarily state-run affairs. They were very ceremonial and supportive of the ruling classes. Mm-hmm. And then the popular religions began to grow up 3,000 years ago, Buddhism and Christianity and Judaism and so on.
I think your analysis of the story of the Garden of Eden is really one of the most fascinating aspects of your writing. You suggest that through the lens of that story, which is one of the earliest stories in the Western religious tradition, we can see what the taker peoples looked like through the eyes of the original indigenous peoples.
Yes, my suggestion is that the story of the fall, which is clearly connected to the story of our own cultural beginnings with our agricultural revolution, has always been mysterious to us because it portrays the acquisition of agriculture as a punishment. And whereas we all think of the acquisition of agriculture as our great blessing. So why does this story, why is it seen in this story as a punishment? And what this indicated to me was clearly this was not one of our stories. It was someone else's story told about us. And so in Ishmael, I put forward the theory that this is a remnant of a story told by an ancient Semitic herding people who lived like the Maasai of Africa do now, or did until recent decades, and that this was their version, their explanation of what happened in the Fertile Crescent to their neighbors in the north, was that they ate at the god's tree of knowledge and decided that they were capable of ruling the world. And of course, the god's tree of knowledge is the wisdom of good and evil, which is they know whose turn it is to live and die, and that's the knowledge that we use daily still now. We decide that it is good for cows to live, and therefore wolves should die, and coyotes should die, and insects should die, and so we are wielding the power of the gods on the planet. And these original tellers of the story thought this would be the death of Adam. Adam, of course, being man.
God warns Adam that if you eat of the fruit of this tree, you shall surely die.
Yes, and I think it was an uncanny prediction, because it is proving to be true.
For 10,000 years, we've been in a slow death.
Yes, and now of course it's accelerating. Yes. And Adam doesn't have very much longer, and really must spit out the fruit of that tree and begin to let the gods rule the world as they once did.
Well, if your analysis of the situation is correct, and it certainly seems to be a very profound piece of the puzzle, maybe not the whole piece, the whole puzzle, but it strikes me that what you're saying is that any project that we might develop in order to better our circumstances is almost always doomed to failure if that project is done within the context of our taker culture. That we have to kind of get outside of our whole culture if we're going to seriously address the environmental and human crises that we face.
Yeah, that's very well said. That's certainly how I do see it. I liken our situation. We are being carried along by a river towards a catastrophe, and programs represent sticks that are put in the mud of the river to impede the flow, and they do impede the flow to a very slight degree, but they are not going to be enough. And that we have to think differently about it, and reroute the river. And this is the river of vision that I talk about. And that when we think about programs, very often, like for example, recycling, which is an admirable program. I have nothing against recycling at all. It's a good thing, but it does represent a stick in the river that is carrying us toward catastrophe. Paul Hawkins points out that by the time we recycle an aluminum can, what we're recycling is 5% of all the material that has already been thrown away. So that it does represent, that's the river. The river has already got 95% of it, it's gone. And by saying we'll recycle the can, you're putting a stick in the river.
Well, it's interesting to me because I think most people who are watching this program right now, they might be getting a few glimmers and saying, he's onto something. But frankly, I think we are addicted to culture. At least it's a very strong habit. We've grown up surrounded by our culture. And
certainly.
Most people would say, well, he may be right, but he's asking the impossible of us.
I would say that would be reasonable, except that, of course, we did this once before. We began a revolution 10,000 years ago, and so it can be done. And if you look into the various experiments that were made in this country, all the other experiments have been obliterated, so we don't know anything about them. But I bring up the case of the Hohokam in North America, who were a people who had an extremely laborious lifestyle, but quite a high civilization, and not much known now, but and it was based on irrigation farming.
In the Southwest, as I recall.
Yeah, around Denver in Arizona. And they kept at it for a couple thousand years. And then suddenly and very mysteriously, they walked away from it. And in our culture, we look at them and say, why would they do such a strange thing? And my proposal is they did this strange thing because they got tired of it, because it was a laborious and unfruitful life for them. And it was creating a suffering class who had to do all of this horrible work of keeping these irrigation ditches open. And it was no fun. And so they walked away from it. So it can be done. The problem for us is, where do we walk? The Hohokam could walk away and simply disappear into the world around them. We can't do that.
No, you're suggesting something a little different. We can't walk away. We have to change or transform ourselves. And you've suggested we have to give the world back to the gods.
Yes. And I also say that I think it's a great challenge, and not an unhappy thing, and that it should be an adventure. And I think that it's the greatest adventure that we've ever faced. And so I'm not daunted by it. I think that what is daunting is to think of trying to do it the hard way, which is to continue to put more and more sticks in the river. This is what depresses people, because they see all of the bad things that are happening, and they say, how can we ever stop them? Because they just seem to mushroom and multiply every day. And of course they are impossible to stop. If you think, every time something bad happens, I have to rush in and attack it. That's, that kind of reactivity is impossible. We can't do that.
Well, Daniel Quinn, I think as we look at your thought, you're quite a combination, an optimist in the sense that you believe we certainly can change a 10,000-year-old bad habit, and maybe also a realist in that your novels suggest that other people will view this kind of thinking as evil because they're so attached to that way of being. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for sharing this half hour with me.
It was a very great conversation.
And I'd like to thank our viewers for joining us, and I would like to encourage you to check your program listings for part 2 of this 2-part series on changing and saving the world with Daniel Quinn.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 9 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
For early access to our videos and live stream events, sign up for our free weekly newsletter at newthinkingaloud.org.